Good to meet you all. I'm Ned. I'm co-founder and CEO of Great Question. We are the all-in-one UX research tool that combines research recruitment with either from your own customers or from a panel of partners with all of the methods, interviews, surveys, and prototype tests, and then a research repository to store and share everything in one place. But that's probably the last time I'll gas bag about who we are. I want to focus on the session. And so for this session, we're focusing on this growing trend of tool consolidation in DesignOps. And this is really coming from that perspective of like, well, I guess a lot of customers come to us for the purpose of tool consolidation, mostly in the research ops side of things. And understand the benefits, the challenges, because let's be obvious, there are challenges, there are trade-offs, and what is the future of this approach? And so hoping to help people that are really looking to optimize their workflows. And so we're joined obviously by Jadyn Aguilar from Gusto, who is a customer of Great Question. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And hello, everybody who's joining today. I'm so excited for the conversation.
Awesome. Great. Well, maybe let's start by Gina, love the quick intro from you and maybe give a quick description about your role.
Yes, absolutely. So hello, everybody. I'm Jadyn. I am joining you from Vancouver, Canada today. I have the privilege of leading two teams at Gusto. I lead the design operations team as well as the UX research team. So from a design operations perspective, I work really closely with the team to help pave the road that just allows the product design org to just do their best work and just delivering great quality work for our customers and for the business, tooling, processes, craft development, fostering a sense of culture and community. You are all very familiar with all of that. And from a research perspective, I work really closely with the researchers to evolve how we work. And we're consistently opening up the space for them to investigate how to consistently meet the needs of small businesses and those of their employees. We're always leading and advocating and empowering teams across Gusto to make sure that our products and our offerings are crafted with that customer centricity and the customer needs in mind in everything that we do. That's a little bit about me.
Awesome, thank you. And we are a Gusto customer. Actually, I've been a long-time Gusto customer, and I have to admit, a bit of a fanboy. You can definitely tell that everything's crafted with customers in mind. So it's awesome to get to work together. And so, can you tell us a bit more about? Well, maybe before we rip in, actually, just want to take a moment to say we want this to be interactive. Do not feel like this is just a one-way thing. If you've got questions, throw them in the chat. And I'll act as moderator here. So feel free to throw anything in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. Anything that we don't get to along the way, we'll save them up and we'll drop them at the end. And so maybe you could give us a bit of an overview about the current landscape of DesignOps tools at Gusto. So, how many tools are you currently using to manage DesignOps, and like how well are they integrating what you've got today?
Yes, so there's kind of two facets in how we're doing tool management or in the way in the tools that we're using day to day. There's the tools that we use day to day to do all of the design operations functions. And they've got some really cool integrations. We use Asana to kind of map out our weekly sprints, and that integrates really nicely with Slack and Confluence and the Google Drive and Figma. So for instance, we've got some really great Asana intake forms whenever we're getting certain types of requests, and we get pinged in Slack to let us know that a new request came in, or when something changes to done in Asana, or we add a comment somewhere. That is just really nice to have all of those different touch points when we're working remotely and we're working asynchronously. So those are kind of like the go-to ones that we're using day to day. And we also manage procurement, budget, access, and processes, and constantly evolving the way that we're working with other 5 tools across Gusto that are mostly used by the product design team. Great Question being one of them. So we're consistently leveraging all of this work. Making sure that folks have the right access, that we're helping folks understand how to use the right tools or how to use the features and functionalities that come with them to kind of to just use them to their full extent, and also helping inform how do those work together also with our processes that we've got internally to just try to make life as easy as possible for folks to be able to just, do great work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so like I guess in terms of that stack as it exists today, like what are the pain points? Is it perfect? Does it run seamlessly? Is there more opportunities for consolidation or maybe even unconsolidation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for us, I'm really happy with the work that the IT team has done at Gusto. They have been working really proactively and kind of forming this source of truth of what the entire tooling ecosystem at Gusto looks like. So we've made a very conscious effort to work really closely with them and leverage their practices, their tooling, like their guidance to make sure that whatever it is that we are thinking about introducing or removing from the
Mm,
system, that we're thinking about it holistically, that we're thinking about, what impact is this going to have? Because a lot of the times, I'm using a tool and I think I'm the only one that's using it. And then all of a sudden
mhm,
we find out that legal is also using it for one thing and
mm.
sales for another. So it's really important for us to think really holistically, and be really, really mindful. So I'm eternally grateful for the IT team because they have taken on that opportunity and they've just done a really phenomenal job of giving us that visibility into the sense of ownership that we all have and that sense of responsibility that comes with being a part of that system.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's a funny partnership I find with IT and teams. Whoever's owning that, right, is owning
Mhm.
the almost can sometimes be a gatekeeper, like no more tools. That's the default. And other times I think can be more open to exploring and
Mhm.
finding new tools, or rather than being like, no, everyone has to use Jira for every ticketing system. You're like, oh my gosh, or Asana, right? You have to use Asana for
Right.
everything. There are times
Yeah.
Asana doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, could you talk about how that maybe, I know this isn't a question we talked about before, but is talk about how that relationship's evolved. Has it changed a lot, or has it always been pretty stable since you've been there?
Yeah, no, I think the team, what I love about the folks that I work with at Gusto is everybody's really in service of each other and really empathetic. So I haven't really come across an instance where the team's like, no, absolutely not. You can't do that thing. It's
Yeah.
everybody approaches it with a lot of curiosity, and we're always asking each other these questions of like, what unique problem would this be solving? Do we have other tools that kind of solve the right problem, or a lot of the times we find tools that solve like a third of the problem or half of the problem. So we
Mm,
get together with the team and we have really intentional conversations about what that means. Like, what are the things that we're uniquely trying to solve for? And then we talk about the trade-offs, right? We talk about like,
mm,
what would it mean? Like this tool works really well with engineering, but it doesn't necessarily work really well for, for design. What are the ways that we might be able to, how might we have a lot of how might we
yeah.
conversations,
Great.
and then through that partnership it's really easy for us to just find a happy path forward. But the way that we find the happy path is by being very, very clear and intentional about what trade-offs are being made.
That's awesome. And is there actually this a great question from a newcomer in the chat?
Mhm.
Um, do you have recommendations for uh, creating standards and defining ways of working for your team when you're working across disparate tools? I actually was thinking about that even just for working with the IT team.
Mhm.
Do you have
Jesus.
even just processes for the how might we side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a matter of I always approach it as just a conversation, like, and that's exactly it. Just highlighting, like, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve, and I'm trying to get a sense of where, how would that impact you or other folks and your visibility, the visibility that you have on how other folks might be impacted. How might we be able to solve this problem? Help me understand kind of what it is that you are trying to solve for and kind of what your goals are here. And then from there, just really approaching it also with a ton of curiosity. I'm empathetic to the IT teams and the fact that I don't even know the amount of tools that they are managing. So for me to approach it with empathy and hey, I understand, I get it. I completely empathize with the fact that you're trying to do so many things for so many people.
Mm,
Help
mm,
me understand how can I, what are the pieces or the pieces of the puzzle that I can bring to make this conversation easier for us to for us to be able to work within your sandbox to a certain way. Like we know that you have standards
Mm.
and processes in place. Help me, like I would like to understand what those are so that with that in mind, I can bring forward some ideas, some potential solutions, and get
Mm.
your point of view on what might be the best path forward. So I think that's kind of like the underlying tone of how I approach most of these conversations with partners across the org.
That's awesome. And so, like, yeah, how were you able to consolidate tools? Like, talk me through the journey.
Oh my goodness. This was a very fun challenge. So if we talk about you know, of great, if we use great question as an example, we applied kind of like a design thinking approach, making sure that we're empathizing what I was just chatting about, how understanding the system in which we're operating, understanding the problem that we're trying to solve, defining that problem and being very intentional about, what are some of the pain points or some of the opportunities that we've identified? What are some of the feedback that we've gathered? Where are we going really slow? Where do we see opportunities for automation to reduce that manual kind of effort? We ideated a bunch of ideas on how we might be able to solve the problem. And from
Mm.
that perspective, we explored kind of two opportunities, right? So there's the current state of, like, for instance, we already had a series of tools
Oh,
that
that's
were
right.
helping us conduct research,
Mm.
right? So so do we invest in optimizing the tools that we already have, and what impact does that have, right? Is that gonna, our biz tech team, are we going to be
Mm.
able to, do they have
Hmm.
capacity to help us iterate this? Is this in their roadmap? What impact would that have if I come to that request? How much would we need to invest? How much time of an engineer or a couple of engineers' time would we need to optimize all of these things, right? So some of those things of what's the cost associated with us investing and iterating here versus what's the cost associated with us looking for out of the box solutions and things that are already potentially in the market where we can, where we can assess kind of what might be the best path forward for us. So that's kind of how we came across GQ. We evaluated internally what it was going to take. We evaluated externally, what was what what was out there. And then when we were evaluating what was out there, we had mapped kind of like the amount of tools that the different tools that we were using for each part of kind of like the research journey or flow internally.
Mm.
And we found that it was like 10. We were using 10 different tools to do
Mm.
bite-sized pieces and solving different parts of the flow along the way. So we focused on participant experience. What are some of like
Mm.
non-negotiable,
Mm.
absolutely required features for us? Impact that would have internally in processes. Of course, the cost, the investment, time, resources.
Mm. Mm.
And then also scale. What are the opportunities if we bring something out or if we invest in iterating our existing tool? What does that mean for continuous growth and scale and future needs that we might have within the team? So that's kind of like an example of end to end of how we were able to consolidate. If we think about, great question. And also we did a test, we piloted a few tools, and then we made a decision on what was going to best serve our needs moving forward. And we put together kind of like a rollout or an onboarding strategy that helped us kind of bring other folks along the journey and identify key stakeholders and what support they would need in the change management.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. Thanks for the overview. And this is a pretty common, thing we see is, custom. And we're talking mostly on the research ops side of things here because we're obviously a research tool, but obviously this applies across the design ops side of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I think it's so great to talk to Jadyn about this stuff is that she ran such a thorough process, like really taking the time to work with the team to understand like what are all the needs, what are all the current tooling, what's the user journey that goes through this, and then what are the ways we could plug this? Is it an all-in-one tool, or is it
Mm-hmm.
just we need these couple of point solutions that we're going to stitch together, and how well do they integrate? Like making those decisions and then taking the time to actually test.
Mm-hmm.
Getting people to agree to pilot programs or trial ways to trial, and most vendors I think will work with you on this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Um, which then gives not only I think for yourself, but I think you were able to see helps bring the stakeholders along for the ride. That look, I've run a thorough process. this
Mm-hmm.
is the best tool. It is going to be a big outlay, not just on
Mm-hmm.
the money side of things, but it's the time, the implementation side of things.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear if you've got anything to add here, because it's actually been a while since we talked about this, but like, what was the
Yeah.
outcome of this? Like, what was the, we did this consolidation,
Mm-hmm.
we tested it, we implemented it, and now it's been a while now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what have you learned, and what's been the impact on the business?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, you're right. We haven't spoken about this in a while.
Mm,
We've been operating with Great Question for about a year, if we continue to use GQ as an example. The biggest impact that we've seen is that it completely changed the way that research works with its cross-functional partners. There was a very large cultural shift, which was really lovely and fantastic. We had some tools that helped us do the job previously, but the fact that we've reduced so much of the manual effort that was required in each
mm,
part of the role, it just opened up the space for conversation. It opened up the space for researchers to be able to work really closely and form strong partnerships with product designers and with PMs, and how we're prioritizing work, how we're democratizing research, how we're empowering other folks to make customer informed decisions. Um,
mm,
so that was kind of one of the biggest things that we've loved to see as a result. And it also improved the ability for folks across Gusto to get closer to our customer in this case, right? So
mm,
Gusto describes itself as, we describe ourselves as customer obsessed. Everything that we do is completely customer centric, and we're aiming to do that in everything that we do. And if that means, potentially, getting a PM to do an empathy session, is just sitting down with somebody in their customer base, or part of
mm,
their audience for their product, and just understanding what are the opportunities, their evolving needs, and for them to bring it back and like, holy moly, I learned a ton from sitting
mm,
down with this customer. And now we've got some really great insights of things that we should try to uncover to help inform our roadmap, so that we
mm,
make sure that our next iteration or that our next launch
mm.
is really solving for those customer pain points.
Yeah, and it sounds like that couldn't have been done before, the tool consolidation, right? Because there's too many things for people to learn and manual processes, and
Yes.
you almost couldn't entrust them to it. It's too complicated. It's like giving
Yes.
a toddler a power tool. You're like, maybe not. You need some
I think,
guardrails.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think it's more, it was just the space that was opened for conversation and collaboration, I think was the
Mm,
key part, is we get to spend less time, jumping from tool to tool to tool to try to figure out,
mm,
to try to
mm,
complete a certain part of that task. Whereas now, we've got some automations in place. We've got, our Asana intake forms, and, our Slack notifications and office hours, and, GQ kind of streamlining that end-to-end research process and automatically
mm,
processing incentives for us. All of those
mm,
things, it just removed time, like it just removed yeah, essentially it gave us back time, I should say, to
mm,
just be
mm.
able to focus in different types of conversation, and then just invested where it would just drive more impact and be more valuable for us to invest in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think when we see this, and I'm going to get to some of these questions in a second, when we think about this, uh, in terms of tool consolidation, the benefits, I think part of it is fewer tools to manage, fewer tools for
Mm-hmm.
licensing and vendor
Mm-hmm.
procurement, all that kind of stuff. But a big part of it's also the training on board it, right? It's like we
Yes.
don't need to train people and onboard them into 12 different tools. It's one
Mm-hmm.
or two tools or whatever. And maybe it's easier reporting and stuff like that. But and this
Mm-hmm.
kind of ties to one of the questions here is like, um, can you talk to me about the change management side of things?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and maybe uh how to work with stakeholders in this change management side of things. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about um, uh, the procurement side of things, like talking me through the procurement processes and how you wrangle the procurement department.
Yes, absolutely. So, from a change management perspective, I think we are consistently, I think maybe like at least once or twice a year, we're running, just in the case of research specifically, and if we continue to use GQ as an example, um, we have surveys that we run to kind of get a better understanding of how are our partners working with us. What are the things that are working really well, and what are the areas of opportunity that we have to improve the way that we're working together, to improve the way that PMs
Mm,
and product designers are gaining that proximity to quality customer insights to make informed product decisions. So we used a lot of that data. That was really helpful to understand and also to leverage in the change management and in the conversation. Hey, we've heard from you. We've
mm,
gotten your feedback. We want the same things. So let's make sure that why don't we align and level set on the fact that all of us we want to achieve the same thing. We want quality insights. We want proximity to our customers, and we want to make sure that we
mm,
are driving really clear solutions for them. So at the baseline, everybody's like, yeah, 100% agreed. This is
mm,
exactly what all of us want. From here, here's some of the things that we've been hearing from all of you and like opportunities, pain points, things that could be better. We're going to go and try and aim to solve some of those because we agree. We see like we connecting the dots is really important, and empathizing to, like, I know PM or product designer, the problem that you're trying to solve is X. I want to be here supporting you in doing that. So let's talk about this. Let's figure out what that looks like. That might mean that the way that we work right now could change. We might optimize our processes. We might require you to do some training. We might require you to learn how to use a different tool, but that'll all be kind of like as part of the path to progress. So it wasn't really too hard to get the team on board because we started from the mutual understanding of how this would benefit everybody.
yep. Yep. Um, just writing down one question that we have in the chat that we come back to around procurement.
Sure.
I guess just going a little bit deeper, like how did you prioritize this like list of criteria when you figured out what tools to consolidate or eliminate? Like you could have kept some of these things that you had. You didn't need to
Hmm.
go and transfer them all. Yeah, maybe you can talk to that.
Yeah, I think it came down to that those pieces of feedback that we were getting from the teams. It was feedback that we got from partners and feedback that we identified internally from teams. And also something really helpful is the researchers had past experience in other organizations and using other tools, and they would
Mm,
highlight like, oh, like this feels really complex and it doesn't really need to be that complex because I remember using a tool that used to do this thing. Could we start
mm,
exploring that? So there was a lot of word of mouth
yeah.
internally with the research team that helped in the conversation of like, oh, I've seen it being done much simpler out there. Is there an opportunity for us to go after that?
Yep.
So that was just really, really helpful, and just leveraging all of those different data points to help inform exactly what that criteria was. We wanted to make sure that that we're reducing context switching because when we mapped out this end-to-end journey, we saw that we had 10 tools that we needed to switch to, and
Mm,
not
mm,
everybody had access to one of them. So somebody else had to ping this other person to do that thing for them. All of these things, when we started to like map it out visually, that's another like a really fantastic artifact to have, is when you map out a
mm,
process visually, you're able to see where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. And then from there, you start to distill, okay, we want to make sure that we reduce context switching, that, we
mm,
optimize this process and how we're processing our incentive, how we send the gift cards to our participants
mm,
as part of
mm.
their incentives, et cetera. And that helped inform it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd love to hear any like challenges or risks that people should be thinking about in consolidating tools, because this all sounds great, right? You've gone and mapped the user journey, you've identified all the problems, you've engaged stakeholders, you've found some
Mm-hmm.
champions that are like, there is an
Mm-hmm.
easier way, there is a promised
Yes.
land, I've seen it, it's real.
Yeah.
Help us get there. You've engaged those people to help you get there. But like,
Mm-hmm.
surely there are risks. And you must have been coming into this being like, there's going to be some trade-offs. How did you
Mm-hmm.
think about that and mitigate that? Yeah, and for other people to think about going through similar transitions.
Yeah, I think it's that the evaluation of the trade-offs is something really, really important, because once you make a decision, you have a very clear path of exactly what problem you are and are not solving for. So we had our list of criteria, and then based on that, what are these different tools helping solve for us as part of that criteria? And I love this a quote from Margaret Atwood, who says, "If I waited for perfection, I would never write a word." And kind of like the same thing applies where you're never going to find perfection. You're never going to find the tool that does everything you want it to be exactly how you want it to do it, right? So it's really important that we remind ourselves that we're not seeking perfection, we're seeking optimization. So if we were able to consolidate, we maybe solve, if we wanted to consolidate 10, but we were only able to consolidate 6 or 7 of those tools and still have the other 3, we can live with that. That's still progress. That's still
Massive.
optimized. That's
Yeah.
huge, right? So
Mm,
so I think that's the biggest thing is the evaluation of the trade-offs and making them very clear and very visible so that
mm,
once we all go into this journey, we know exactly what problem this is solving and this
mm,
problem that is not solving. It's not consolidation for
mm.
consolidation's sake. It needs
Yes.
to be very intentional, and we need to be very mindful of the impact that would have if we remove something. Is that going to
Mm,
increase the amount of time that somebody else
mm,
is impacted
mm,
by this process, or
mm.
whatever it might be?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Not consolidating for consolidation's sake. And yet, perfect is the enemy of done.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think we one thing that we've seen is or we kind of encourage it really, is that you can obviously consolidate. We're an all-in-one tool, so you can consolidate everything, but we often don't recommend that, is that because
Mm-hmm.
we're modular, you might actually just start with one module and say,
Mm-hmm.
look, our immediate problem is research recruitment. Let's solve that. Or we
Mm-hmm.
have a user testing license is coming up for renewal. Let's solve that piece. And we know we have these other problems, but if we try and rip and replace everything at once, it's going to cause a huge amount of thrash.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cause this change management problem. It's just going to suck all around. This is the problem that we're trying to solve today. Let's get that out of the way, knowing that we're future-proofed, likely, but we're not going to boil the ocean and get wrapped around it. And I'll be honest, we suffer from this because we're like going through some tool reviews for customer success right now. And it's like, oh my God, there's so many tools out there, the evaluation process, everything does everything a little
Yes.
differently. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's very tough.
I feel your pain. I'd love to talk about, come back to Peter's question here.
Yes.
Any tips for dealing with procurement? Um, you know, we've talked about the IT side of things and bringing them on
Mm-hmm.
board, but at some point it gets handballed across to procurement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any tip to make it easy to work with them?
Yeah, I think I found that at least with the procurement team that I work with, I'm blessed to work with a really collaborative procurement team. They ask a lot of really fantastic questions that challenge us in the best ways possible. They'll ask questions about just making sure that we're thinking this through holistically, and that we're, being thorough in our process. Like, oh, were you able to have a conversation with IT and see if there were any overlaps? What about this? What about that? So we had a lot of really intentional conversations. But what really helped drive this forward was that we built a really, really strong case that highlighted all of these trade-offs, for like clearly outlined, that we shared with senior leadership to kind of
Mm,
like get buy-in and alignment, that we shared with the procurement team of like, here's every question that we
mm,
think you're gonna have.
yeah, yeah.
And we've got answers for all of those. This is the exponential value that we'll see. This is how we're going to be saving time and money through
Mm,
like context switching. What was the impact of context switching? What's the impact of reduced licenses? If we
mm,
consolidated
mm, mm,
10 tools or 6 tools or 5 tools, if it means that we're not using those tools anymore, that means that there's considerable savings there that could be reinvested in a different way here. And there's an added bonus of these things, right? So for instance, in the case of GQ, a big thing for us was the customer, or like the participant experience. We
yes.
were, if we're reaching out from potentially different tools, what does that look like? We want to make sure that we're building trust with the customers that we're reaching out to. So can we have a consolidated place, a source of truth, where every time that Gusto reaches out to me for research practices, I know what to expect now. And it's kind of like the seamless flow that ties in really nicely and gives me a strong sense of confidence and trust in my payroll and benefit, software provider, so that's really important for us. So from a procurement perspective, if we were able to lay out all of these opportunities, the team was just like, yeah, this makes absolute sense, this is great, let's do
Mm,
it.
yeah,
So
of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, it made sense, right? These are the costs, these are the trade-offs, this is what we're solving, this is what we're not solving, and this is what we're gaining through doing this process. And the team's like, yeah, it makes total sense, let's do it.
Love that. Cool. We're at time. I actually thought we had a little bit more time, but we're at time. We're going to take some of these additional questions and go and wrap them up and share them in a blog post. It's a summary of this. So I'll make sure that gets sent out to everyone on here. I'd encourage you to check out the buyer's guide we put together for buying research tooling. It's got input from folks like Jadyn and Kate Towsey and a bunch of other research ops type folks. And a lot of people said, look, it's really helped us inform our decisions. It's only part one. We actually need to get part 2 and 3 and 4 out. But Jadyn, thank you so much. This was freaking awesome. And we'll have a share out to do afterwards to answer the rest of these questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.